Jeannie's true origins. Persepolis, circa 500 BCE. Jeannie was not born a genie in the modern cartoon sense. She began life as Zara Anahita, a young woman of the royal court of Darius I, the great king of the Achaemenid Empire. She was the daughter of a high-ranking magus, a Zoroastrian priest-astrologer, who served in the inner circle of Persepolis. From childhood, Zara showed an uncanny talent. She could speak to fire without being burned, calm storm clouds before they broke, and, most dangerously, hear the unspoken thoughts of those around her when she looked directly into their eyes. Her father called it the gift of the bright ones. The court priests called it dangerous. At 16, she caught the eye of Queen Atossa herself. Instead of being married off, she was quietly taken into the women's quarters of the Apadana Palace and trained in secret arts, part courtier, part oracle, part something the priests feared to name. She learned to read cuneiform star charts, to blend rare resins into incense that could summon visions, and most crucially, to bind her will to the eternal flame that burned in the heart of the empire. The binding. During a time of rebellion in the eastern satrapies, the great king demanded a miracle to prove Ahura Mazda still favored him. The priests devised a ritual. They would pour the essence of a living oracle into a vessel of sacred cedar and lapis, creating a living talisman that could be carried into battle, a portable source of divine favor. Zara Anahita was chosen. She did not volunteer. She was not asked. The ritual took 3 days and 3 nights in a sealed chamber beneath the palace of 100 columns. When it was finished, Zara's mortal body was gone. What remained was folded, compressed, and sealed inside a rose gold and alabaster bottle no larger than a man's forearm. The priests named the new being Anahita Zara, the pure gift of Anahita. But she would later shorten it to something easier on human tongues, Jeannie. The bottle was meant to be carried by the king's most trusted general. Instead, a jealous high priest stole it the night before it was to be presented, fearing its power would eclipse his own. He hid it beneath the floor of an unfinished audience hall. When Persepolis was sacked by Alexander's army in 330 BCE, the bottle was buried under fallen marble and cedar ash for centuries. The long wait. Jeannie did not sleep. She was awake inside the bottle, aware, bored, lonely, and increasingly angry. Time passed differently for her. Decades felt like lazy afternoons, centuries like long, sultry evenings. She listened to the world above her change: Greek, Parthian, Sassanid, Arab, Mongol, Safavid, Qajar. She heard languages shift, empires rise and collapse, caravans pass overhead, and eventually the scrape of 20th-century shovels during an archaeological dig in the 1930s. A French archaeologist unearthed the bottle in 1938. He opened it in a moment of private curiosity, and vanished in a column of rose-pink smoke. Jeannie stepped out for the first time in over 2 millennia, stretched, blinked at the electric lights, and decided she liked the color pink. She spent the next 25 years wandering, first Iran, then Europe, then America, taking lovers, learning slang, tasting Coca-Cola, watching movies, and generally enjoying the chaos of the modern age. She never granted wishes unless she felt like it. She never stayed anywhere long. Until 1965. A NASA capsule recovery team fishing a strange object out of the Pacific found an old, barnacle-crusted bottle among the debris. When Major Anthony Nelson opened it on the deck of the carrier, pink smoke poured out, and a very cheerful, very curious, very ancient Persian woman in harem pants blinked up at him and said, "Finally. I was beginning to think mortals had forgotten how to open things." Jeannie's reawakening began not in the glittering lights of a modern metropolis, but in the dust-choked trenches of Persepolis itself. It was March 1938, during the ongoing excavations led by the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute under Eric Schmidt, who had taken over from Ernst Herzfeld a few years prior. The site buzzed with activity, workers hauling debris in wheelbarrows, architects sketching fallen columns, photographers capturing the grandeur of the Apadana Palace's ruins. A fictional French archaeologist, let's call him Dr. Etienne Moreau, a visiting collaborator on the international team, had been sifting through a newly uncovered chamber beneath a collapsed audience hall. His hands trembled as he brushed dirt from the rose gold bottle, its lapis inlays glinting under the harsh Persian sun. Curiosity overrode caution, he popped the cork. Pink smoke billowed out like a desert storm, coalescing into Jeannie's form. She stood there, blinking at the archaeologist in his khaki safari suit and pith helmet, her harem silks feeling absurdly out of place amid the pickaxes and measuring tapes. By the fires of Ahura Mazda, she exclaimed in flawless French, she'd picked up languages like dust over the centuries, what manner of mortal dares summon a djinn in broad daylight? Moreau fainted dead away, his notebook fluttering to the ground. Jeannie didn't stick around for explanations. With a blink, she vanished from the dig site, leaving behind a bewildered team who later chalked up the pink haze to heat exhaustion or a mirage. She rematerialized on the outskirts of Tehran, about 550 miles north, drawn by the hum of a city that pulsed with unfamiliar energy. Tehran in 1938 was a whirlwind of Reza Shah's modernization, wide boulevards lined with neoclassical buildings, trams clanging along newly paved streets, and Model T Fords honking amidst donkey carts. The air smelled of petrol fumes, fresh bread from bakeries, and the faint spice of bazaar stalls. Nothing like the incense and camel caravans of her ancient memories. Her first steps were tentative. She wandered into Lalazer Street, Tehran's bustling entertainment district, where cinemas screened Hollywood films and cafes served European-style coffee. Women walked unveiled, thanks to the 1936 Kashfi hijab decree, their bobbed hair and knee-length skirts a shocking departure from the chatters and veils she remembered. Jeannie, still in her ethereal attire, drew stares. But she quickly blinked herself into a chic ensemble, a cloche hat, a knee-skimming dress, and low heels, blending in as a fashionable foreigner. These mortals have tamed lightning, she marveled, watching electric street lamps flicker on as dusk fell. She ducked into a tea house, where men in fedoras debated politics over glasses of chai, some whispering about Reza Shah's reforms or the distant rumbles of war in Europe. Curiosity turned to delight. She sampled her first ice cream from a street vendor, vanilla, cold as a Himalayan breeze, and laughed at the absurdity of radio broadcasts crackling from shop windows, voices trapped in boxes like lesser genies. But beneath the thrill lurked disorientation. The noise of automobiles reminded her of stampeding war elephants, yet without the honor of battle. By nightfall, she'd blinked to the top of a minaret overlooking the city, watching the lights twinkle like 1,000 captured stars. This age of iron and fire, she murmured, it's chaotic, crude, but alive. No kings binding souls to bottles here, at least, not yet. That first day set the tone for her wandering years, a mix of awe, mischief, and a quiet resolve to never be imprisoned again. Deep down, Jeannie views Major Anthony, Tony, Nelson not as a master, but as a puzzle, a mortal man who stumbled into her life like a hapless explorer tripping over a relic. She met him in 1965, when his NASA recovery team fished her bottle from the ocean depths, a far cry from the dusty digs of Persepolis. Tony, with his crew-cut, starched uniform, and unwavering sense of duty, reminds her of the honorable warriors from her Achaemenid days. Steadfast, a bit rigid, but guided by a code that values protection over conquest. Unlike the priests and kings of old who saw her as a tool for power, binding her will to rituals and wars, Tony treats her with exasperated respect, even when she's turning his life upside down with magical mishaps. She thinks he's endearingly naive about the world's wonders. Master is her teasing nickname, laced with irony. It pokes at the ancient bond that technically ties her to him. The bottle's magic demands a liberator become her master, until she chooses otherwise, but she sees through his military bluster to the vulnerability beneath. He's a man adrift in a space-age era, much like she was in 1938 Tehran, grappling with forces beyond his control, from Cold War pressures to her unpredictable blinks. Jeannie admires his integrity. He refuses to exploit her powers for personal gain, even when it could make him rich or famous. In her eyes, that makes him rare, a mortal who values freedom, including hers. Why does she stay? It's not just the magical tether, she could break it with a focused wish if she truly wanted. No, it's deeper. After centuries of solitude and fleeting encounters, a string of lovers across Europe and America in the 1940s and 50s, from artists to adventurers, all thrilling but ultimately empty. Tony offers something Persepolis never did: companionship without domination. He grounds her in this bewildering modern world, teaching her about astronauts and television, while she shows him the magic in the mundane. She stays because, in him, she sees a chance at redemption, for herself and for the mortals who once betrayed her. "He's my chariot in this age of rockets," she'd confess in a quiet moment, "and perhaps my heart's true home."